Now let's just tell you a little bit about the history of flights between India and China. India stopped all flights with China in late 2019 when the Wuhan virus first became a big world story. Remember, at this point, since late 2019, there has been not a single direct flight between India and China ever since. Now, India may not resume direct flights with China anytime soon. It was never on the cards for the near foreseeable future, and now with the Chinese COVID crisis, I don't think it's going to happen anytime in the medium term at least. Polami Saha, who tracks aviation for India Today, is with me live. She's been breaking all the big stories on the advisories as well as the new protocols that are going to be kicking into place in airports across the country, including random sampling that I'm going to tell you in a moment from now. Polami, India and China have no direct flights. They haven't had any direct flights for a long time, since the pandemic began at least. Where do things stand as far as flight ban is concerned? It's a little complicated because these are flights that take passengers from India to places like Hong Kong, Singapore, Vietnam, South Korea, etc. How does it work if a flight ban needs to be imposed?
Well, the advisory will have to come from the Ministry of Health. As you heard Dr. V.K. Paul over there say after that COVID review meeting in Delhi earlier today, it is status quo in terms of putting any sort of restrictions on international arrivals. But you did mention about random sampling, which is to begin at airports, which of course sees international incoming flights. But as far as India-China flights are concerned, like you rightly pointed out, we don't have any direct flights between India and China since the onset of the pandemic. And that's mostly owing to the fact that there are very strict COVID-related restrictions in China, and Beijing had imposed those restrictions. Like we resumed international flights with most countries earlier this year, we wanted to resume flights with China as well. There were many students who study medicine, etc. in China who wanted to go back, and they were obviously petitioning and lobbying the government. We were constantly in negotiations with China as well earlier, but China has certain rules. For instance, they say that we will allow for flights, but if anyone, in terms of the testing that happens at our airports, tests positive for COVID-19, immediately there will be flight cancellations and we will stop flights coming in from your country. Now, India was not very comfortable with that rule because that would be a huge burden on airlines who would have to face that cancellation, and when they're not responsible for the COVID testing. The COVID testing, so to say, is to happens as far as the centers which are identified by the Chinese embassy in India is concerned. So because those negotiations were happening, direct flights hadn't resumed. Now with this reoccurrence of the virus and the spread of the virus in China, obviously we'll have a rethink about that. We were looking possibly, Indigo for instance had indicated that they might want to resume flights to certain cities like Guangzhou and Chengdu in March 2023, but given the current scenario, unlikely that those direct flights will resume between India and China, Shiv.